Hi, everyone, and welcome to the GLIO CEO Investor Series. My name is Manoj Patel. I manage the listed infrastructure security strategies at DWS. And today we have Calvin Butler, CEO of Exelon Corporation. I'd like to first start with thanking GLIO for hosting this event and for all its work that it does for the asset class. And with that said, Calvin, thanks so much for making your time today.
Manoj, it's my pleasure. Good to see you.
Great. Now let's start with the big picture. For those that aren't familiar with the company, tell us more about Exelon Corporation and particularly why sort of the investment thesis for infrastructure investors.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to be the easiest question you asked me, Carly, throughout this. So I would tell you that Exelon is the largest transmission and distribution company in the United States, especially by customer count. We have the privilege and the responsibility to serve 10.7 million customers across some of the most diverse cities in our country. That's including right here in Chicago, Illinois, Baltimore, Maryland, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We also have the privilege to serve in Wilmington, Delaware, and Atlantic City. So when you think about that footprint, large urban cities, rural communities, and coastal communities, we serve all customers and serve them all very well. At Exelon, we are an infrastructure company, meaning that we build things. We invest in this nation's grid, and we keep it the most reliable in the country. Our utilities are some of the best operators, and we take a lot of pride in that. When we take a lot of pride in it because, one, we know how we show up each and every day. Exelon companies combined are ranked number 1, 3, 5, and 8 as the most reliable utilities in the nation. And yes, we are striving to get to 1, 2, 3, and 4, so I'll keep you updated. But having said all that, it takes a lot of time and money to make that, to be that reliable. Our 4-year plan going out through 2028, we're investing $38 billion in capital. But not one project, Manoj, is more than 3% of our capital. So why do I share that with you? That means we're a low-risk infrastructure company. We don't have one customer or one project that's driving that investment, not one larger than 3%. And when you look at the variety and diversity of our customers, that is what makes Exelon Exelon. So I'm very proud of who we are, especially when you think about where we've come from. 3 years ago, we were a very different company. And this leadership team that we have assembled here today is, I think, one of the best in the industry and is really leading this transformation of Exelon 2.0 and doing it very well.
Great. And so let's talk a little more about this $38 billion, yes, that you're spending. Can you maybe just give us some context of, what's driving the investment? Obviously, a lot happening with data centers. Yeah. But even more specifically, you're in different geographic regions, you touch different sort of customer bases and industries. So can you help us unpack that a bit better?
Absolutely. First and foremost, our investments are driven by keeping the lights on and the gas flowing. I talked about our reliability, so everything we do, so much is centered on building a reliable and resilient system. We go to our commissions with a plan, they approve it, then we get to work. And out of that $38 billion, most of it is on the electric side of the business. We have some of that investment that's on gas main replacement because we have 3 of our utilities that are in the gas distribution business, which is very important for safety and reliability. Over 30% of our plan is built on transmission, and all of our projects are built from the ground up, meaning that we don't start a project if we don't have a sense that it's serving that customer in an impactful way. And there's no lag within our jurisdictions. So these projects are based on concrete evidence that they're adding value. You talked about the growth that we're having across our business. Right here in Chicago, we've seen a growth of over 17 gigawatts of new load coming in, mostly driven by data centers. But hyperscalers, we've got just 2 weeks ago, we announced Quantum PSI coming with a campus right here on the South Shore, on the lakefront. That's exciting for this business. So 17 gigawatts of new load with just as much in the pipeline. So this is work that is going out for years. So once again, not driven by one customer, not driven by one project, driven by multiple concrete customers and business development opportunities. That's what I'm excited about. And Illinois is just one. We're seeing growth in Pennsylvania. Governor Shapiro and his team have really put economic development on the forefront. And you see announcements that they're doing. I think a couple of weeks ago, 2 months ago, Pittsburgh announcing a big data center project, which you look at the transmission that's being built by PECO in that area. I know the governor's planning a couple other announcements in the coming weeks. I don't want to jump out ahead of them, but that's what's exciting. Maryland, you look at our Brandon Shores and our Tri-County transmission lines being built, 2 projects totaling over $1 billion. Transmission is becoming a big part of that investment thesis. And when you say transmission is only about 20% of our portfolio, but we're investing in our capital plan over 30 to 35% in transmission with a long trail behind it. So we're excited about that. And that's what makes up that $38 billion.
Great. And so if based on what you're saying, a large portion of the investments are prioritized by obviously safety and reliability. And then what makes this environment sort of just better is that there's all these growth opportunities driven by the load growth that you're seeing in your territories.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's been well over 30 years since we've had this type of load growth.
Yeah.
And people often wonder, okay, how is Exelon benefiting from that load growth? Well, I remind them, we're an infrastructure company, meaning that it doesn't happen without us. And we're the backbone of everything that's happening within our communities. Yes, I don't have generation, but I don't have the cyclical nature of that either. My assets, our assets are going to be critical, not just for today, but for the next 50 years. And it's a reason that our companies have been around 800 plus years, because they are economic drivers in the communities that we serve, not just around data center, but the small businesses, our large customers, the other manufacturing that's coming on. So I tell the team every day, yes, we're excited about this growth, but don't get too enamored, because things come and go. Be consistent in what we do. And I think that's why people invest in Exelon. It's the level of consistency, not just in how we operate, our reliability, but our concern for our customers and how we're always using the customer's voice to do everything we do.
Sure. And you talked a bit about transmission. And so maybe you can help us understand, that opportunity set. Obviously, we're seeing, a lot happening in just the whole electric ecosystem, right? Yeah. You have all this load growth, new sources of new pockets of demand, obviously primarily driven by data centers, which are located in different parts of the country. And then obviously new sources of supply, right?
Yes.
We have the continued build out of renewable energy, and now we're seeing a lot of sort of activity on natural gas fired generation.
Yes. So when you think about our investment, all the investments that I'm talking about right now within transmission, consider them in Exelon's footprint, which happens to be a very large footprint, but it's in our footprint. And there's 2 advantages of that. One, because of our size and scale, we know how to do it. And we don't have the same concerns about getting easements, getting waivers, because most of it is on our property. I give you one example, our $1 billion transmission project within the Brandon Shores area, 99% of that was on Exelon footprint. So the timing, the execution of that is that much simpler when it's on your footprint. That's one. And I haven't even shared with you about the $10 to $15 billion of potential transmission on the backside outside of our service territory that is adjacent to our markets. That's what's exciting for us, is that we don't see any slowdown because of the reasons you just outlined. The data center growth, the distributed energy resources that are being brought online, all require transmission and require to be built sooner rather than later. Going back to my statement, we're the backbone of this ecosystem, and getting it done well and getting it done in a timely manner is going to be critical.
Sure. And obviously, you have all these investments, some large, some small, and they all come with their own sort of execution issues and risk. And so can you talk a bit more about how you're managing that, both on an individual project basis and then on an enterprise basis for the company?
A couple of things on that. It's all about execution because you're meeting a customer's, you're working to meet a customer's timeline. You're ensuring that time is money for our customers and understanding that. So let me give you an example. We had a large project in Delaware, a transmission project, and it was being built because some generating plants were retiring. And of course, that generating facility was getting reliability must run until the transmission lines were built. We completed that project over a year early and returned tens of millions of dollars back into our customers' pockets. That's what matters. And the execution of those projects, because of our size and scale, we have concerns around supply chain, but they're not as dramatic because we use our size and scale to leverage on how we show up so we can get that done. We have a metric within Exelon that all of our capital projects are always done within 1% to 2% annually of our total spend, and we compensate our employees for that. So for example, at ComEd, right here, they have a capital budget annually of well over $3 billion. They finish within 1% to 2% of that spent every year. That's how precise we are in doing what we do because we know it matters. So that is the why. And then I would tell you the larger scale, how we approach it. Every big project has a project manager, and we assign that person, he or she, to really driving the execution, identifying the risks early on before we ever break ground, because going back to meeting the customer, the cost involved in that, and ensuring that when we go back to the commission, they can see that we were prudent with every dollar that our customers have allocated to us. Because again, they've already signed off on the projects, meaning the commission. Now it's all about when we go back in at the end, a reconciliation that you did it right. And that's why it's so important.
Great. And obviously to that vein, being a regulated business, obviously you have a lot of interaction both with regulators and, other, parts of the government, legislative environment as well. Can you talk a bit more about sort of what you're seeing and how that's impacting Exelon?
Well, that's my gray hair. So, no. Well, size and scale matters, right? And it also brings in another set of issues. When you're operating in 7 different jurisdictions, you have 7 different regulatory bodies that you're dealing with, and all have different needs depending on where they are and how and their customers and their constituents' requests. What we found is that when you're transparent and lay out your strategy and then involve in candid two-way conversation, good things can happen. We're in a time right now in this load growth period that affordability is becoming a big issue because we do know we have to invest in this system for 1, reliability and safety, 2, for load growth, and our governors all want economic development. But what comes with investment is rising costs. And then from our perspective as Exelon, 80% of the bill is not even me, not even our utilities, it's supply. And the supply costs, why? Because when you have increased demand and lower supply, the costs are going to go up.
Of course.
But customers, Manoj, like you, at your home, you just see a higher bill with my utility's name on it.
Yeah.
You don't get caught up into who's supplying. You just know my ComEd bill or my BGE bill is higher. I have the responsibility to educate my customers, residential, small business, commercial, because they view it. I don't wash my hands from it, but I'm part of the solution. But it's difficult when you're not the majority of the problem.
Of course. Yeah.
Having said that, Exelon created a $50 million customer fund this year to help out. And as I told my regulators, this is temporary. This is a short-term assistance. We need long-term fixes, which is why we're leaning into regulated generation, meaning why utilities should own generation to increase supply and reduce the cost, making it more affordable for everyone. Having said that, regulators in different states are in different places with that. But by starting the conversation and being at the forefront of the why and talking about this is going to help your constituents and my customers is meaningful. We're making progress. And I'm encouraged by the conversations, but more importantly, because we're all working to solve the same problem, ease the burden of energy costs on our customers.
And so what I'm hearing is that while, the environment, when it comes to regulation and sort of obviously different states have different setups, some of the issues that are creeping up, like affordability, actually create like possible investment opportunities, for Exelon in the future.
You take that opportunity or you take that issue and say, what can we do?
Sure.
It has to be short, midterm, and long-term solutions. My view is that I'd love for the competitive markets to work, but when they're not, you can't keep doing the same thing. And that's the conversation I have with my governors, my regulators, and my legislators. I'm with you, but if this isn't working, let's do something different. I do believe that we need the competitive markets to work, but they have to build and be willing to build. I do believe utilities need to be part of that solution, and we're willing to step up in the right environments. You don't have these same issues in fully vertigrated markets. All of my markets are deregulated, so therefore I don't own generation. So what can we do to simulate what's working across the country? And when we have some of the fastest growing markets in terms of load growth. So that is one. And then I would also say too, is that our states and our regions are in different situations. I have Maryland, who's a net importer of energy, and then I have Illinois, that's a net exporter. So they have different needs. Okay, let's get different solutions, but let's talk about it.
Sure. And thinking about just, what's out there in, new technologies and, distributed energy, where, is there an opportunity, for those things to play a role here in solving some of these issues?
Absolutely. I believe that battery storage, increasing line capacity and usage in our transmission system, what I always say, we have to maximize what we have before we say we want something different. That's one. Two, battery storage technology is going to play into all of this. And in some of our jurisdictions, they consider battery storage as a generation asset. So they're concerned in some degree about utilities owning it. But I'll give you an example. In Maryland, they're like, look, we're going to put out an RFP for battery storage, and if competitive market doesn't step up, hey, utilities, let's go. So we're going to give you a chance, but let's move forward. And I'm excited about that because new technologies are going to play, and we have to be at the forefront of utilizing it and can't be afraid not to do that. And it goes to that all of the above approach. But I agree with you, technology is going to be a key driver.
Great. And then obviously, again, as a regulated utility and an asset-based business, you can't get away from talking about obviously balance sheet and financial flexibility. And so could you just help us understand how you're thinking about that and how you're managing, again, just with this significant CapEx opportunity that you're seeing in front of you?
It's real. One of the things that I'm most proud of Exelon is we have the lowest downgrade threshold of anyone in the industry. And I think that's a recognition of our low risk profile. And that's very important to us. So when I talk generation or regulated generation, it has to be done under the right circumstances because I'm never going to put our balance sheet in risk because that's very important to us because that allows us the flexibility to borrow where all of our capital projects, our large capital plants, we're financing it with 40%. And that is part of what Gene, our CFO, has laid out. That is part of our strategy. Having said that, we've also removed risk off the table. 2025, 100% of our equity needs have already been funded and most of it for 2026. So again, removing risk, removing volatility, because I know those who invest in us say, look, I don't want the noise. I want you guys to do what you say, do it well, and let me move on. And that's our whole mantra, is that keep the noise down. You don't need to hear about all the moving parts, but at the end of the day, meet the numbers, exceed expectations, and deliver excellence. And that's what we're striving. So our team is very proud of our low risk profile, and we aim to keep that.
Great. And just to finish up, how does a dividend play a role into this?
Well, dividend for our investors is everything. We're growing our business at 5 to 7% growth CAGR every year, midpoint or better, and we're on track to do that. We continue to grow our rate base up to 8%, and we don't see any shortage of being able to do that with the investment portfolio. You know, our Q4 call will be next year, and we'll update our next capital plan. But if you look to what we've done previously, we've grown our capital budget by 10% annually for the last 3 years. And again, we see no slowdown in that growth. So when you think about the dividend growth, that dividend growth is going to be steady, solid, and we're proud to be consistently delivering on earnings expectations. Gene and I were celebrating 3 years in these seats. And for 3 years, we've met expectations and exceeded them. And we don't see any changing of that going forward.
Great. And, you know, sustainability is top of mind for many investors. Can you talk a bit on what that means, you know, for Exelon, and maybe even any certain initiatives you'd like to highlight?
Thank you. Thank you for asking, because sustainability has lost a little bit of their luster, and it hasn't with Exelon. We have a commitment. We made a commitment back in 2019 called our Path to Clean, where we're going to be net zero business-driven emissions by 2050. There's several components of that, meaning that we're going to electrify our fleet. We were going to drive out our GHG emissions. We were going to look at what we're using on our system and reduce our carbon, and we were going to drive forward. We have not backed off on that at all. What's important about that, Manoj, is that when you look at the communities that we serve, it matters to them. And if we say we're going to be customer-centric, we have to serve and show up for our communities. And that's why our whole Path to Clean initiative is not just an initiative, it's a way of doing business. And our investment in local businesses that are driving and inventing new technology to help clean up the communities, that's called our Climate Change Investment Initiative, 2C2I. We're investing in local businesses well over $10 million that are coming from the communities and have ideas of how to impact the environment in a positive way. That hasn't changed for us. So we're still there, we're still doing it, and I think we're being recognized for those efforts. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, great. And maybe, obviously, there's a lot of great things happening. You talked about, you know, all the opportunities. Maybe just help us look out a little bit further, past the end of the decade.
Right.
You know, what's your sort of long-term vision, for Exelon?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I talk about this with my board all the time, and our leadership team does. I want and have committed to Exelon being the best utility in the nation. What does that mean? That means, one, we're the most reliable, collective as a company. Two, we're meeting our investors' expectations by earnings growth, and we're considered a premium utility because we've transformed this business. We have 4 pillars that I focus on: finance, operations, customer, and employees. And I'm going to take a minute to talk to you about those. On the operations side, on a day like today in beautiful Chicago, when there's blue sky day, there should be 24/7 reliability, period. There's nothing more frustrating to a customer to go home and see a blinking light when there hasn't been a storm. Now, what that requires is that we use technology, we use predictive analytics to do work on our system before it needs it. Because I can't put enough capital in the system to give you 24/7 reliability. That's one. Also, after every storm, 100% of my customers are restored within 12 hours. We're already measuring ourselves to that. After every major storm, whether it's a tornado, hurricane, 100% of my customers restore within 48 hours. My operations team gets nervous when I talk about this, but that's what excellence looks like. That's one. On the customer side, meeting our customers where they are, really talking about what does it mean to be a customer-centric organization, helping economic development within all of our jurisdictions and growing, not just the 17 gigawatts, but how do we show up for those small businesses and those residential customers, making it easy, utilizing technology, whether it's generative AI, whatever it is. All our customers want is to make us easy to do business with. We have a ways to go, and we're committed to that. From an employee point, and I'll get to finance last, I know who's looking. From an employee standpoint, what is our value proposition? Why do individuals want to, out of college or in high school, want to come work for us? We want to be considered a place for them to grow and to spend the next 40 years with, and that they are someone who's going to be trained, and they're going to, and with our platform, if they want to move to Baltimore, Chicago, we have a platform for them to move and to continue to grow. I've been at Exelon for 17 years. Prior to running BGE, I never had a job for more than 2 years. They moved me around and I kept growing. That is what I want to offer to every employee. And from a financial standpoint, my pillar is we want to be considered a premium utility. And what does that mean? We have to deliver our earnings growth consistently, and we have to continue to meet and manage our costs out of our business. You notice in all of our earnings calls, we don't talk about how much cost we're bringing out of our business because that's part of our DNA. And I can let you know we're driving hundreds of millions of dollars of costs out of this business, which is why our O&M CAGR is less than the rate of inflation, because we understand the affordability metric, and you're allowed to invest dollars when you're being good stewards of every dollar. And that's how we approach it from a financial standpoint. And we want our investors to see that this is a company who does what it says it's going to do and is committed to excellence, and therefore being recognized for that.
Great, thank you. And if investors would like to learn more about the company, where should they go to?
Well, I always turn them to Andy Plinge, our Vice President of Investor Relations, and Gene. But as I always say, we're going to show up. If investors want to call us, we'll show up, because there's no better place, and we're so proud to tell the story about this transition and transformation. So we'll show up anytime, so don't hesitate to call.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.